Hi, I'm Daniel Myers, Developer Relations here at Snowflake, and this is another episode of Behind the Data Cloud. Welcome to Behind the Data Cloud. I'm your host, Daniel Myers, Developer Relations here at Snowflake. Today, I'm interviewing Steve Segal, who is a prominent member of our community and actually another Snowflake employee like myself. So, Steve, how are you?
Doing very well, Daniel. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So, part of this interview process, I want to learn a little bit more about you and some of your background here in the data industry.
Sure. I spent some time at Oracle, where I really got into really understanding databases even better. I've always been really interested in data and performance. That really has always excited me. But then about a number of years ago, about 5-6 years ago, I decided to actually join SAP as a solution architect for their database and data management team because their product was really exciting to me at that point in time. That an in-memory database, so that was really fast. So it was something that I was really excited about talking to customers about. And then over time, I started hearing more and more about Snowflake. So a little over a year ago, I joined Snowflake, and it's been a great experience for me with incredible people, incredible technologies.
It's definitely been a wild ride for me too. So that's awesome. So, so you mentioned some of your background, some of your previous work history. What do you do here at Snowflake?
So I'm a solution engineer here at Snowflake. So what that means is that I work with customers and I help customers with their data management, data platform needs. So basically I help them simplify their technology architecture so that they could actually take advantage of the data that they have in their entire organization.
Okay, that's awesome. So it's really cool to be able to have that direct line of communication with so many Snowflake customers. So you probably have a lot of insights, have been able to glean a lot of information around, what are some of the most common, obstacles or mistakes that you see customers making around, their data strategy and how do you solve this?
Right. Some of the biggest obstacles I've seen are they're starting with a complex landscape. So they have, many systems. They have many layers of systems. The data, is siloed, and then to bring the data together, or to analyze their data, they're actually bringing it into operational data stores and data warehouses and data marts. So there's a lot of layers to it. So the data is constantly moving, and you're making copies of the data. And this is typically because of the legacy architecture that they've been working with, that you just can't support the data without actually transforming the data multiple times. And this has caused a lot of resources, spending a lot of time on the technology landscape. So I would say that the majority of the time that IT spends the resources on is actually just keeping the lights on because they have so many systems in place. And that really makes it harder for them to innovate, right? If they want to do anything, it means touching many systems. It's hard to get to their data. So it's not easy to be, they're not as agile as they all like to be. And as a result, they're just not getting value from their data, right? So that's where we come in, and we really help them try and simplify their technology landscape. So there's fewer moving parts, and a lot easier to get that value out of their data that they want.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the tools that you use when trying to simplify that landscape? Around data ingestion, transformation, et cetera.
Right, and that's where Snowflake plays a huge role. Is that within Snowflake, it could take care of a couple of those layers. So we have, we support multiple workloads, right, from data lakes, data warehousing, data engineering. So some of the tools that we're talking about, within Snowflake, you can actually do a lot of the transformation that's needed of that data. You don't have to go to outside tool, although we have wonderful partners that can help pull data from their current source systems into Snowflake, and they can transform it along the way. And we definitely encourage that when that makes sense. But as well, some of these tools will actually push the actual workload down into Snowflake, and allowing that. When they do that, that allows them to take advantage of the scalability and the capacity that Snowflake has to offer. Because often we find that those transformation turns out to be a bottleneck in the whole entire data pipeline. And when you're working with a fixed number of resources, when you're working with a certain number of CPUs to move the data from point A to point B and do transformation, it's not going to scale very, very well. As your data size increases, you have more transformation. It's going to take longer and longer. So what used to take maybe 2 hours might take 4 hours now, and it might not fit in the window that you've allotted. But when you actually push that workload down to Snowflake, you have the ability to increase your capacity on the fly. So if something takes 2 hours, you could double the capacity, and maybe that could get done in an hour. So as your volume of data that you're working with increases, the time necessarily to transform that data and ingest that data doesn't have to increase, because you have that capacity at your fingertips to elastically scale up and down.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, the differentiation between storage and compute. And I also like to say, the differentiation between compute and compute, right? So you can have different warehouses for different workloads. You have a dedicated, for example, piece of compute that's specific to a certain workload, right? So you're not having different queries compete for resources. So that's pretty powerful. Awesome.
Yeah, when I first started hearing about separation of compute and storage, I thought, that's a pretty interesting concept. I could see how you could scale it maybe differently and independently, but really only when I got to Snowflake that I really realized what that meant. I didn't really fully understand the implications of that. And the full implication that I found was that you could isolate these workloads, kind of what you're talking about, that you could now all of a sudden perform ETL or ELT in the middle of the day, which people want, right? Companies want their data coming in all throughout the day. They don't want to wait till morning or till the middle of the night to move the data, so that the first thing in the morning they have access to the data. So this really allows them to now have a workload, what we call a virtual warehouse, set up to pull in data. Well, at the same time, you could be doing data science on another virtual warehouse. You could have financial analysis on another one, and you don't get that noisy neighbor conflict where one workload, one user perhaps who forgets a join in their query completely impacts every other user on the system, because they're completely isolated. There's no contention for these resources. So really, it took me a little while to kind of really get that and see that in action, and how it could really benefit customers.
So, what are some of the most common business problems that you see when working with customers? Like, what are they trying to solve when evaluating something like Snowflake?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones that we often see are the customer 360, right? Every customer wants to know their customers better, right? They want to know what they're buying, when they're buying it, what are their buying habits, how much are they buying? So that's really an important part for a lot of our customers, just understanding their customers better, so that they could better market to their customer. They could understand when they should, have sales and send email campaigns to them. So that's a huge one. I mentioned security data lakes, another big one, and really wherever you see large volumes of data, that's when they come to Snowflake a lot. I mean, look, we have customers from small data sets to large data sets. We scale with our customers, but companies like energy companies, they get a lot of value because, again, The energy markets are huge, pulling in IoT data from sensors. We see that a lot. So if you look at Snowflake, energy companies are really gaining a lot of value from having Snowflake.
So if there was a piece of advice that you could give a customer that's trying to put together their data strategy, right? How they ingest, where it goes, how they transform it. What piece of advice would you give them?
Oh, good question. I would say I always like the theme of simplification. I would say pick a data architecture that could help simplify your landscape, because while setting it up could be difficult if it's complex, maintaining it over time is going to be far more difficult. So if they could just simplify, have fewer moving parts, that would be a huge piece of advice that I would give them. And then and then just looking at some common mistakes that that a lot of companies kind of trap that they fall into. I would say a lot of them underestimate the time it takes to roll out some of these projects. So the advice that I would give them is to make sure that you have enough time to understand your data quality, because data quality always seems to be a problem. And you think you have the right tools and you can move data, into your target system to get a great data platform, but the quality of the data is not there, because the data from their source systems, they could have been there for 10, 20, 30 years, and it's not what they need it to be. So leave enough time for testing. So test your systems, test the data quality, and make sure that you've left enough time for that. That's a big one.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know from a software development perspective, the quality of data has a monumental impact on things moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to change topics a little bit. I know that you have been one of the most active members in Snowflake Labs, Snowflake's open source community on GitHub. Can you tell me a little bit about your project Accelerator?
Yeah, absolutely. We've myself and my colleague Todd Linton, we've been working with a lot of customers, and common theme came up around working with all of them for years. For as long as we've been in this business, is that people love to use Excel, and for years we've been trying to replace Excel. I've worked with so many projects where you're trying to give them a web UI to kind of replace Excel different ways, and people will not let go. Users love Excel and it's powerful, and they won't let go of it. And we realize, hey, it's better to join them if you can't beat them. So what we've done is we've built an integration with Excel. So it allows users that really love Excel to be able to pull data from Snowflake into Excel very easily. So without knowing SQL, they could choose what table that they want. They could choose what columns that they want, pull that data into Snowflake, and then analyze that data. They can create pivot tables from that. And if the data changes, they could just refresh it, and then their charts and their tables will change. The other thing we found out is that there's oftentimes that they want to update the data in Snowflake, or they want the business to update the data. And commonly what it looks like is that there's a table with some master data in it, and the business is responsible for making sure that data is up to date and accurate. And when it's not, they go to IT and say, hey, this data needs to be updated. And it was a constant back and forth with the business and IT updating. So what we've built as part of this Excel integration, this Excel to Snowflake integration, is the ability to update the data. So when you pull the data from Snowflake, you can then within Excel just make changes to that data. And then you could push the data back to Snowflake, and those changes will be reflected in Snowflake. So, we're not proposing this for, tremendous number of transactions on the same table for multiple users, but it's great for tables that don't change as often, and it's really governed by one or two users.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've watched it grow on Snowflake Labs, and it's really cool to see something like that get published and used by customers and individuals. So that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, and Daniel, one thing great, you're talking about Snowflake Labs. It's great to have it out there because that's a place for open source community to come together and collaborate.
Completely agree. Completely agree. There's a lot of projects right now on Snowflake Labs, which for everybody viewing, is github.com/snowflake-labs, and you'll see a link down below as well for it. But yeah, what's cool to see is that there are so many different projects there for all sorts of different software tools that relate to Snowflake, but also different types of packaged demos and guides on how to do different things on Snowflake. Well, I want to say, first off, thank you for coming on today. We are out of time. So Steve, how can people follow you online to learn more about what you're doing and things like that, and get involved in the community?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Steven Segal at Snowflake. So please reach out to me. If you have any questions, follow me. Would love to speak with more of you. Also, be part of the community at medium.com/snowflake, community.snowflake.com, and developers.snowflake.com. And the more people that we have as part of this community, the more value it's going to bring to everybody. So thank you very much, Daniel, for this time.
Well, awesome. Thank you again. And for everybody there, I'm Daniel Myers, host here of Behind the Data Cloud. I'll see you next time.